Welcome back. I'm very excited to introduce our next two speakers. First, Michelle Whaley, President and CEO of the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore. Michelle is well known throughout the region's business community with a diverse career as a CEO of the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance and CEO of the Downtown Partnership of Baltimore. She's a former consultant to a variety of industries, including Baltimore. Troy Lamel-Stovall is CEO and Executive Director of TEDCO, and most recently was Chief Operating Officer at the University of the District of Columbia. He is an entrepreneur at heart and in spirit with a vast amount of experience as a consultant and CEO. We especially want to thank Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore and TEDCO as signature partners for this year's conference. We want to thank them for their support to make this happen as sponsors. Here now is Troy and Michelle to talk about their top 5 high-impact resources available to entrepreneurs and innovators. Troy, Michelle, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Be More Bold Conference. My name is Troy Lamel-Stovall. I'm here with a very dear friend of mine, Michelle Whaley, who runs the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore. And we just want to say welcome. And we just want to tell you a little bit about some of the great things happening in Baltimore, both from EAGB and for TEDCO. Michelle, again, thanks for being here today. I want you to tell folks a little bit about yourself and the Alliance.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. In your beautiful offices. I haven't been here before.
Thank you for that.
But thanks for hosting me, Troy. The Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore is a regional organization. We are a marketing organization, and our product are the assets and economic opportunities in Greater Baltimore. We cover 7 jurisdictions: Baltimore City, Cecil, Carroll, Hartford, Howard, Anne Arundel, and Baltimore County.
You don't want to leave anybody out.
I don't want to leave anybody. I just got to do that. I got to do that all the time. But our role really is to bring attention to all the assets in Greater Baltimore, which are very rich,
Absolutely.
As you know.
Absolutely.
We are lean and mean. I have 4 very terrific staff people, a huge board that are very much invested in the region as well as in the Economic Alliance. But what we do is market, and I said our product is the region. We do not provide ongoing assistance or any type of incentives. We don't negotiate deals, and that's why we need partners like TEDCO.
Absolutely.
We're all about collaboration and partnership. Economic development is a team sport, as you know, and that's very much how we approach economic development and the marketing of economic development for the region.
Yeah.
So that's really what we. That's our lane, and that's where we try to stay.
And you do a great job with that, and you're
Thank
right.
you.
I mean, and for the folks here at the conference, you're there together to talk about how to use the various tools that are in Baltimore and the area to drive deals, to drive economic impact, and that's obviously a lot of what TEDCO is about. And for those that don't know about TEDCO, TEDCO is a 22-year-old entity from the state of Maryland. We're funded by the state of Maryland, but we're quasi-public, and that quasi-public nature allows us, Michelle, to be able to be venture. We do investments, as you know, we do a lot of investments, early stage technology investments, but we do just more than that. We partner with the folks of EAGB and others in the ecosystem to make sure that entrepreneur who has that great idea and funding from TEDCO has access to all the other elements of the ecosystem, things like wet labs and office spaces and
So
3D
key.
printing, lawyers, computer programmers, all the things that make a great, and so that's what's going to make Baltimore and obviously the greater all of Maryland, because we're about all of Maryland, but this is about Baltimore and how do we bring all those together. So we want to thank the folks together. Michelle, are there any specific programs you want to talk about that the EGB's got that the folks here at the conference need to know about?
Well, I do want to mention, because you mentioned entrepreneurship. Innovation and entrepreneurship are key for this region. We are so blessed with the assets that we have in this region that are supporting entrepreneurship and innovation. And it's across all industry sectors.
Yeah.
The industry sectors, Troy, that you know that we focus on are diverse, and they are the bedrock of the economies of the 7 jurisdictions, if not Greater Baltimore, Central Maryland, all of Maryland. No surprise, cybersecurity, life sciences, healthcare, logistics is huge.
Yep.
Because of our location along the East Coast, the Port of Baltimore, one of the top performing ports in the country. Manufacturing, contrary to popular opinion, manufacturing is not dead.
It's not.
And agriculture, which is very important for some of our rural counties. And increasingly energy, particularly alternative energy, is the state of Maryland, the region, the entire world for that matter, is moving towards alternative energy. So we focus on those industry sectors. The programs that we're a connector and a convener.
Mm-hmm.
So we do connect the dots. When we know of an organization or a company that is looking for resources, in addition to TEDCO, obviously the state of Maryland itself, Department of Commerce is a huge partner for us. The local economic development divisions, departments, organizations in each of those 7 jurisdictions are very, very close partners. We meet with the economic development heads every month to find out what's going on in their locations. We partner and collaborate with a lot of the incubators and accelerators in the region. The UMB Biopark, the Fast Forward at Johns Hopkins,
Yep.
Loyola Center for Entrepreneurship, because we want to make sure that not only do they know what we can help them with, but that we know what they're doing. And we could push out their message and help them connect the dots, help them know, particularly the companies that are in those, the entrepreneurs who are in those programs, that they know that there's a TEDCO and how to get to a TEDCO. So that's really where we see our role. We need to have our eyes and ears everywhere to know what's going on so that we can connect those dots for people.
I like that. And you mentioned a couple of educational institutions, and we should mention that CCBC is a sponsor. We want to thank CCBC for your leadership and your sponsorship and the role that CCBC has in doing that, but also providing that workforce, which is an important part of this.
Amazing. The community college system in our 7 jurisdictions is unbelievable. CCBC's programs are churning out individuals who are high school graduates, may not at the point in time be interested in or able to go to a 4-year school, can go to CCBC,
get those letters out.
In a 2-year program, a degree program, or a credential program as an on-ramp to a solid career pathway job. And not to say that additional education may not be necessary or desired, but the fact that you can go to CCBC at night, on weekends, part-time, and enter the workforce at a solid salary and a career pathway job is really a huge asset.
No,
for
for those that know me and you know me, I'm come from the higher ed space, and I'm a huge advocate of the community college overall and CCBC specifically, and this notion, particularly in the tech space, of that you don't always have to have a degree, that you could have credentials and having that ability to show that you have the ability to, because as an investor, it does us no good as investors to be able to find the next great cyber or life science or ag entity, and there's nobody to work. Nobody to work for. So CCB has an important role. And at TEDCO we talk about. I actually and I like to say there's 3 T's that every startup has a challenge with. That's time, that's talent, and that's treasure. And I use treasure as an acronym for getting financial resources and capital, exactly. And time. For us, we want to give people back a minute because they're busy, right? And so we've launched this thing called the Maryland Entrepreneur Hub, and it's there's a ton of resources you talked about here in Maryland, but you have to go. The entrepreneur has to go find them. They have to spend time to go get them. And so what the Entrepreneur Hub does is bring those resources to the entrepreneur, saves them that minute,
so key.
Give them that minute. Talent, you mentioned talent. Couldn't agree more that. Great ideas, but how do they hire that employee number 3, 4, 5? How do they hire that CFO, hire the HR person or the marketing person? And so we've got to help them, and we've got some tools to help them identify. But also, how do we make sure that that we're including and expanding the opportunities to those who may not have always participated in these entrepreneurial efforts? And obviously, treasure. Is one that everyone wants access to resources. And so we have those early stage resources, but we don't pretend that we have all of them. And so how do we connect them to other folks who are here at the conference today? How do we make sure that all of you are knowing about it? I talk about, Sean may have told you this, I grew up in Houston, Texas, and got a chance to work at the Johnson Space Center. So I grew up wanting to be an astronomer or an astronaut. So I talk about this notion of orbits colliding. And that's what you and I are talking about. That's what this conference is about, is how do we intentionally have orbits collide? And to be a little scientific here, when orbits collide, they create a new gravitational constant, and that new gravitational constant attracts more orbits, and a new celestial
Yes.
body gets formed out of that all those collisions. And that's what we're doing.
That's really, I love that analogy. You mentioned talent and capital. We are pushing aggressively this year an out-of-region marketing, very, very targeted marketing of some of our key industry sectors. So what we're doing is replacing digital ads in markets where we feel we have the assets to compete. So for example, we're running Google Life Science ads in 5 cities. I'm never going to remember all 5. Boston, New York, Northern Virginia, the Research Triangle Park, and Houston. Yes, 5.
There you go. There you go.
Because we know that we have the assets to compete in those markets. And what we're trying to attract is not necessarily new business.
There you go.
We're trying to attract talent and capital.
There you go.
Because we know that if we have the talent and the capital to keep our companies that are already here. Growing,
Yep.
that they will bring in more companies.
There you go.
And it's
that's the
really
flywheel.
key.
That's the flywheel. That's how you
Absolutely.
get the flywheel going.
Absolutely.
Is the more we can retain of that talent, the more more capital will be attracted to invest in that talent. The more talent wants to be around that other talent, and it attracts other capital.
And you may know this, Troy. We Economic Alliance produces quarterly investment reports. It's just a summary of all the investment in the 7 jurisdictions. In the first quarter of 2021. I always have to remember what year we're in because we lost
20. We lost a year.
The first quarter of 2021 was over $500 million, just the first quarter,
Yeah.
which eclipsed 2020 and eclipsed most of 2019. So we know that investors are finding that there's
Absolutely.
they can get a return on their investment by looking at what's in Greater Baltimore.
No, you hit on some great numbers that even during the pandemic, we had records numbers of investment opportunities happen in Maryland overall, in Baltimore specifically, and what's just some great opportunities that have happened. Again, many of you are attending this conference were probably part of that funding, and so we want to thank you for providing that funding to our growing ecosystem here. But there's still more to happen, as Michelle mentioned. There's some great stuff in cyber and in life sciences, but there's these emerging pieces around ag tech, aqua tech, blue tech, green tech. That are there, and we've just got these great institutions in the Baltimore area that need to be invested in, and so we shouldn't. And also I'd like to talk about the intersection of things. How do you when you intersect cyber and ag? There's some great opportunities there in cyber ag. So those intersections is also where we like to have some.
Cyber is becoming a very important issue in manufacturing and in logistics as well, but in manufacturing, which is becoming increasingly digitalized. Digitized. Manufacturers are using AI, big data to design, produce, distribute tools. And I was at a meeting once where a manufacturer said, well, why do we need to worry about cyber? And the person who was making a presentation said, do you have data? And he said, yes. You put your data on a computer. Yes. Okay. You need to worry about cyber.
That's true.
But that issue, there's a lot of intersection. Ag tech is becoming huge. I mean, the use of drones to fly over your crops to see if they need more water.
Yep.
It's just amazing. And innovation, you all just are so good at finding that innovation in pockets where people don't think to look.
I appreciate that. And the other part of this, finishing your thought, is that we have to protect the food chain. I mean, I think what many things COVID was understanding that there's vulnerabilities in along the way in our food chain, and so being able to protect those in a far better way is what we've got to do a better job, and we have those resources and that talent here in Maryland to do that. But thank you for that about TEDCO. I mean, one of the things we've been very good at over these last 20 plus years is, to your point, is being able to see those early successes. It's helping an early stage investor. Because sometimes you have to, the entrepreneurs are just so excited and so passionate. They give you this big broad vision, but you're trying to get them to focus on something that they can get done, that we can invest in, so that then we can get them ready.
It's almost a tangible.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And so, but being able to, we've got just a great team that allows us to be able to see the potential of what is the kernel. right? What's the
Yeah.
seed, if I could use that ag analogy, and we've been successful with it, and we continue to want to be. But we do that because of partners of EAGB. So again, thank you all. Appreciate you all being here today. Again, can't thank CCBC enough for their leadership and their support of the Be More Bold conference, and look forward to actually, hopefully, very soon being able to be with everybody as
yes.
we move through this COVID and able to get. So again, thank you all, Michelle. Thank you, and thank you for
Thank you
EAGB.
so much, Joy. And
Appreciate
thank you all for listening. And you know where to contact us, so we're always happy to talk to you.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.
Michelle, Troy, thank you. That was terrific. And thank you again for sponsoring this year's Be More Bold conference. We couldn't be doing this without you. I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker, Clarence Wooten. Clarence is a 1993 graduate of CCBC and was named an outstanding alumnus for his career achievements as well as his philanthropy. Today, he is founder and general partner of Revitalize Venture Studios, investing in startup technology companies in Silicon Valley. He really is Baltimore's own Silicon Valley success story. Clarence, it's a privilege having you with us here today.
Oh, fantastic, Dennis. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here, and especially talking to this audience.
You have had tremendous success over the years, going back 1998, building internet startups. And some of the success I've been reading, you really do credit some of your early success to CCBC. Tell us more about your experience at CCBC.
Yeah, you're taking me back. I arrived at CCBC the fall of 1990 after graduating from high school at Randallstown. And at the time I got to CCBC, I wasn't even sure if I was truly, I knew I was college material, but I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go. I had a passion for architecture. CCBC had a program and computer-aided design for architecture and engineering. And had a great lab, I spent a lot of time there. And really, CCBC is truly where I realized that I was truly a good college student. I was actually a better college student than I was a high school student. So when I think back to first getting to CCBC and the things that I learned at CCBC, and I also played basketball for Catonsville's basketball team at the time. It's a great experience. It's funny because when I came to CCBC, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I thought I wanted to be an architect. And so, in taking a lot of my CAD classes, some of those classes were in the evenings, and there were a number of architects who worked in the field who had come to CCBC in the evenings to learn CAD. And they were in my classes, and they pretty much told me that architecture is a great profession, but you're not going to make a lot of money for a long, until you're well into your 40s, which is funny because I'm in my 40s now. But that sounded like forever, and it made me want to switch and not be an architect, but somehow stay related to architecture. And so I started my first company at CCBC. It was called Envision Designs. We did computer animation for architects, fly-throughs of houses, etc. Things that you see commonplace now every time you turn on HGTV. But in 1990, 91, it wasn't commonplace. And so somehow I got my hands on some software called 3D Studio and taught myself, went through the tutorials, taught myself computer animation. And amazingly, CCBC saw my talents and asked me if I would teach a class in computer animation. And at the time I was 19 years old, I was a student there, and I found myself teaching an evening course in computer animation, at CCBC. And so, while I was there as a student, a basketball player, I was also there as I guess a professor, since I taught that first course, which did wonders for my confidence. And like I said, CCBC, those early experiences helped me get to where I am today.
And just for a moment, I want to take you back even a little bit farther. One question I always like to ask folks is, what was your first job that you had as a kid?
Okay. That's an interesting question. I want to say my first job, real job, kind of, but it didn't last too long because I was terrible at it. I on Route 40, there's a Toys R Us there, and I actually, worked as a cashier at Toys R Us. And I think about 3 weeks in, I screwed something up because people were able to pay with Jeffrey money. That was the Toys R Us giraffe, and I think I, misappropriated, put it in as regular money, and my register came up short, $30 short. And so I got accused of taking money from the register because I rung in Jeffrey money wrong. And that was enough for me. I was out after that. So that was my first job. And quite frankly, one of the only jobs I've had over the last 25, 30 years that I didn't create.
Wow. Now, after CCBC, you went on to Johns Hopkins University. Amazing success there. And then Image Cafe came along. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so the entire time I was in college, I was starting these little companies. The first one was Envision Designs. That was the one I did the architectural animation for. But then that turned into a multimedia company called Metamorphosis Studios. And at the time, I met my co-founder, who was a software guy. I was a computer animation guy, and we started doing edutainment software on CD-ROMs, if you remember those. But right around the mid '90s, the bottom fell out of the CD-ROM market, and this thing called the web was starting to emerge, and businesses wanted these things called websites. So we pivoted our company and we started designing websites for small businesses. But small businesses didn't want to pay a lot of money because at that time they weren't sure if they were going to get a return on investment on having a website. I would joke and say they want to look like a Fortune 500 company, but they don't want to spend more than $500. And so, I'd also become a student of the internet and realized that e-commerce was becoming a big thing. This little site that sold books called Amazon had popped up, and everyone was selling stuff online. And so my partner and I put our heads together and we said, why don't we turn websites into products that we could sell, templates? But not use the word template because it implies cheap. So we decided to call these things customizable website masters. And we created Image Cafe, the world's first superstore of ready-made websites for small business owners. And it turned out to be a big hit. Now, at that time, there was a company called Network Solutions, which, if you guys know GoDaddy, Network Solutions was the GoDaddy of that era. And they were headquartered in Northern Virginia. They were a publicly traded company, and they had a monopoly on .com names. It was the only way you could get a name was to go to Network Solutions. And, of course, a .com name is like a building permit, but the building itself is the website. So they wanted to be able to quickly sell small businesses websites right after they sold them a domain name. And no one did that better than us because we had turned websites into products. And so they came along and bought the company. We were actually trying to get them as an investor and a strategic partner. They wanted to own us. And, actually, I thought it was too early to sell the company because we had just launched maybe 7 months prior. But when they wrote us a $23 million check, it was sold. And so that was, of course, a pivotal turning point for me because I certainly didn't grow up with money. But it really solidified me as a lifelong entrepreneur. And part of that deal was I had to go to work for Network Solutions, which was my second job after Toys R Us, and run the Image Cafe as a separate division. So if you guys know what Wix or Squarespace is today, Image Cafe pioneered that whole space in the late 1990s.
Wow. And so ever since you've been vacationing on a beach with all that money?
No. And if you know anything about business, you realize that, if a company sells for a number, more than likely the founder didn't get that much money because, very rarely when you're building a business, do you own all of the business because you have to leverage other people's time and other people's capital. And we had raised some money. So, I may have owned a little more than half the company. And then, of course, Uncle Sam came and took a lot of money away. And, I did all the things that young entrepreneurs do that probably shouldn't do. Like I went and bought a boat and put it in the Baltimore Harbor and a condo in Miami, and then got back to work and started building companies again, which ultimately took me to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you are a serial entrepreneur. You're always coming up with new ideas. Where do your ideas usually come from?
Usually my ideas come from a problem I'm trying to solve, very organically. And I guess over the years and trying to get funding for various ideas, I began to understand what kind of ideas actually get funded by venture capitalists. First and foremost, the idea has to be big and the total addressable market has to be enormous. And so, and the idea probably shouldn't be a me too. If someone else has already had it and raised a ton of money, it makes it that much more difficult to raise money for that idea. Not impossible, but significantly more difficult. So almost all of the ideas for my company came out of a problem that I was trying to solve. Case in point, the last internet startup that I built and sold was called Progressly. We turned business processes into visual, repeatable workflows in the cloud. Think Pinterest for processes. That idea came about because I love, whenever I'm trying to do something that takes a long time, I love whiteboarding it. And I would, write out the steps across a whiteboard. And as each step is completed over a long period of time, we put a sticky note under that step so that you can kind of see your process unfold or your progress unfold under your process. And there was no visual way to do that online, no easy way to do that online. And I thought it should exist. And that became the basis for Progressly. And ultimately Box. If you guys are familiar with Box, similar to Dropbox, a cloud storage company, they ended up acquiring that company in 2018. But there were a lot of steps in between the idea and that exit.
Yeah, and today with Revitalized Venture Studios, Steamroll, you are investing in startups, especially in the early stages of those product developments. What do you look for when investing in a startup?
Yeah, so I do some investing, and I think a lot of people look at Revitalized Venture Studio and assume that we write checks like most venture capitalists, when in essence we really don't. We are a venture studio, and a venture studio is very similar to a movie studio. So if a filmmaker wants to make a film, that filmmaker is either going to make an independent film using his own resources, or he's going to go and pitch his film idea, his screenplay, to a studio like Disney, Tyler Perry Studios, etc., and then go and make that film with the studio. So the studio is making an investment, yes, but the studio then becomes his partner. And so that's what Revitalize is. We're a venture studio. Our mission is to build breakout software companies with Black founders, led by Black founders and diverse teams, because we want to see more diversity in tech. And so we co-found those companies with the founders. And we typically do no more than 3 companies a year because, our constraint is operational bandwidth. We actually work alongside the entrepreneur to help the entrepreneur build that company, and we aren't just writing checks. Now, with that having been said, as an angel investor, I have invested in startups. I'm more interested in investing in crypto these days. Because crypto happens to be a lot more liquid than a startup investment. When you invest in a startup, you don't really know when you're going to get your money back. You get a return when that startup is acquired or it gets to the scale where it can go public. And oftentimes that's a 5 to 7 year window. With crypto, it's a little bit different. You invest in Dogecoin. That's a bad example, but at any given time, you can pull your money out.
Interesting. How important is a business plan when you're considering which startups to work with?
In the tech space, business plan died just like dinosaurs. Okay, so we don't talk in terms of business plans. We talk in terms of pitch decks, which is really it is a business plan of sort, but it's visual. It's simpler. It's a little more succinct, and we really think about the business model, and we put a lot of emphasis on the team. So we do want to see a plan, but not a classic business plan like I wrote in the late 1990s when I used to pitch VCs. We want to see a 13 slide or less deck that really breaks down everything we need to know. And of course, we want to talk to the founder and understand the team and really understand the go-to-market. How are you going to take your product to market so that it gets visibility and attention? Because there's a lot, lots of options out there for consumers and even businesses if it's a B2B play. And so business plan is not important, but a very strong pitch deck is critical.
What do you hone in on in that pitch deck? Are you looking at the people, their background, their experience? Is it the go-to-market strategy? Is it the numbers in terms of the financing? What do you look for?
I look for, I look for the people, of course. There's a saying that goes, you back the jockey, not the horse. But a lot of us, particularly if it's an entrepreneur of color, haven't necessarily had great opportunities to build businesses in the past because of lack of access to capital. So I really look at the vision and the product, or at least in terms of what the product could be once it's been fully built out. Because typically when I'm looking at deals, they're very early, in many cases pre-product or early product. And of course, I'm looking at the market scale. Because, I want to, it takes a lot of work to build a company. And if I'm going to get involved either as an investor or an advisor or a co-founder, I want it to be a big opportunity that has the potential to become what we call in Silicon Valley a unicorn company, which gets, get to the point where it's worth on paper at least $1 billion within, 4 to 7 years. And so those are the kind of signals I look for. I also like to I also like seeing that the founder has, something, or the founding team in their backgrounds that say that they can really do this. They are the people to do this. And it doesn't matter who else thinks up this idea. They're not going to beat this team. And in many cases, the reason you back the team so strongly is very rarely does any pitch deck survive first contact with customers. You end up making lots of changes, and sometimes the business becomes something completely different.
What do you find is the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make?
I think there's two things. I think a lot of entrepreneurs overestimate what they can accomplish in a year, but underestimate what they can accomplish in 10. And most entrepreneurs think that the business should be at a certain point after year one. And no, you may really actually just be getting started by then, because you would have learned a lot through trial and error. So I think abandoning an idea or a pathway too soon because it didn't happen fast enough is a mistake that entrepreneurs make. I also think a lot of entrepreneurs believe that once they've built that product, that if you build it, they will come. No, not at all. Building it is the easy part. Getting to product market fit is the hard part. And that's, Airbnb launched and no one used it. It took them a while to get the product market fit, to really understand, how to attract their ideal consumer and customer to the point where the business really took off. So I think those are the two biggest mistakes that founders make.
Interesting. I recently had a conversation with one of the co-founders of Hotmail, and I was asking him the same question. What's so important? What is the key ingredient to making a startup successful? Obviously the inverse of why startups fail, but he was saying that you got to have the energy, the time, the grit, and not underestimate just how much time and sacrifice is involved. How important is that, do you feel, in a startup?
No, I think it's critical. I think there's 4 things and characteristics that I tend to point to, and that's does the entrepreneur have passion? Is the entrepreneur focused? Is the entrepreneur persistent and lucky? So let me back into each one of those. You know, passion is really, really important, because if you're not passionate about your own idea, you're not going to be able to attract investors or employees, because it won't come across as something that you love. And you need to love what you're doing, because it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Focus is even more important, because as an entrepreneur, you have limited resources, limited capital, limited human resources. So you really got to focus like a laser. And one of the easiest things to do as an entrepreneur is to be unfocused. But you have to focus, because you have those limited resources. Persistent. And I think that's part of that grit that he talked about. Persistence can make up for a lot of things that really doesn't happen. I've seen entrepreneurs who are persistent become really successful just because they just didn't, no didn't mean no. And last but not least is lucky. And so timing has a lot to do with it. But luck, you kind of create some of your own luck, because luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So if you're prepared, when opportunities come your way, you'll be able to take advantage of them, and it will be like the universe. The whole thing is divine. You'll come across as being extremely lucky. So those are really the four things that I look at in terms of being successful as an entrepreneur: passion, focus, persistence, and luck.
I think that's a great summary of everything you've been talking about here. And obviously it's worked for you, having that passion, that persistence, that focus. A little bit of luck certainly helps. You certainly sold the business, Image Cafe, at the right time. Timing is everything. Clarence, want to thank you for taking the time here with us today.
Thank you. This has been amazing. And shout out to CCBC.
Thank you, Clarence.